Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving into an absolutely epic journey. We're talking a 4 billion year saga to try and answer one of the biggest questions out there. How in the world did we get here?
You know, our story isn't just about the few thousand years of history that we all learn about in school. Nope. It's this deep, cosmic mystery, a puzzle that goes back for eons. And honestly, scientists are still trying to find all the pieces.
Okay, let's get into it. To even begin to find the answers, we have to rewind the clock way back, 4 billion years to be exact, to a young Earth that you wouldn't even recognize. I mean, just imagine a planet that was basically a roiling, churning ball of fire and molten rock.
So it was in this totally chaotic, fiery environment that life's first, incredible chapter actually began. It wasn't some big, dramatic explosion. It was quiet, almost invisible. It was the emergence of a single microscopic cell.
So how did that first cell even pop into existence? Well, scientists have two main ideas. Did the building blocks of life basically hitch a ride on a meteorite, traveling across the galaxy to seed our planet? Or did it happen right here, sparked into being from the chemical soup of Earth's very first oceans? We don't know for sure yet, but here's the thing. Both theories agree that it all started in the water.
Just think about this for a second. This incredibly simple single cell is our oldest relative. It carried the blueprint for everything that would ever live, the DNA. That makes it the great, you get the idea, ancestor of every plant, every animal, and every single one of us on Earth today. We're all tied back to that one tiny spark.
Now, for the next 2, and I mean billion with a B, years, evolution was moving at a snail's pace. First, these cells just figured out how to make perfect copies of themselves. But then they took this huge leap forward. They started combining, mixing up their genetic info. And that right there was the key that unlocked the door for all the complex multi-celled life that eventually filled the oceans.
All right, let's jump forward to the next great leap. Life wasn't so simple anymore. The oceans were crowded, bustling, and dangerous. A new world was emerging, one full of predators and prey. And our ancestors? They had to get creative just to stay alive. It became a full-blown evolutionary arms race. To avoid being someone else's lunch, our tiny worm-like ancestors evolved cells that could detect light. Over millions of years, boom, they become the first eyes. But with sight, you suddenly have all this new information flooding in, so you need a brain to process it all. And as the predators got smarter, we had to get tougher, developing armored skin just to survive another day.
But this arms race kept pushing our ancestors into these shallow, murky waters where there was hardly any oxygen. They were faced with a choice: suffocate or adapt. And in a moment that literally changed the history of the planet, one of our ancestors did something amazing. It pushed its head above the water and took its first gulp of air. That single act is what led to the development of lungs.
So now our ancestors are on land. It's this huge new world, full of food and oxygen. But this new frontier? It came with its own set of gigantic challenges. And believe me, their toughest tests were still on the way.
250 million years ago, the planet basically went through hell. A series of massive, non-stop volcanic eruptions in modern-day Siberia just tore the Earth apart. It pumped the atmosphere full of toxic gas, which triggered this runaway greenhouse effect. This plunged the planet into the single largest mass extinction event in its entire history. We call it the Great Dying.
The scale of this thing it's just hard to even wrap your head around. An unbelievable 95% of all species on Earth were just gone, wiped out completely.
And here's the most amazing part of the whole story. Against literally all odds, facing almost total annihilation, our ancestors were part of that tiny, tough 5% that made it through. The sheer tenacity of our lineage is just mind-blowing.
The survivors of the Great Dying evolved, but one group rose up to dominate the entire planet: the dinosaurs. So for the next 150 million years, our ancestors had to survive in their giant shadows. How'd they do it? They got smaller, they became nocturnal, and they hid in burrows. Our senses got way sharper for living in the dark, and we developed 2 game-changing innovations: giving live birth instead of laying eggs, and feeding our babies with milk. We became the first mammals, defined by how we adapted and cared for our young.
In fact, you can feel this ancient history on your own skin right now. Our little shrew-like ancestors had thick fur. When they got cold, tiny muscles would make their hair stand on end to trap a layer of warm hair. Today, when you get cold, those exact same muscles contract and you get goosebumps. It's a direct physical link to our tiny ancestors hiding from dinosaurs millions of years ago.
So our mammalian ancestors survived, and they even thrived in the shadows for millions of years. Then, 65 million years ago, bam! An asteroid hits the Earth, wipes out the dinosaurs, and ends their long reign. For them, it was a total catastrophe. But for our small, furry ancestors, it was a golden opportunity, a chance to evolve that would lead them to a huge decision point. Over millions of years, the climate in Africa got hotter and drier. The huge, lush forests started to shrink away, and in their place were these vast, open grasslands. Food in the trees got harder and harder to find, and that constant hunger eventually forced our ancestors to make a really bold, really dangerous choice. They came down from the trees to look for food on the ground.
Out on that wide-open savanna, standing upright was a total game changer. It let our ancestors see over the tall grass, spot predators from far away. But this one simple adaptation had a consequence that would change the world. For the first time ever, our hands were free. Free to carry food, free to hold our kids, and eventually, free to make and use the tools that would define our destiny.
And once our hands were free, our evolution just kicked into overdrive. The speed of change just took off, setting the stage for the last few incredibly fast steps that led straight to, well, us.
In what is a pretty short amount of time, evolutionarily speaking, we just had this explosion of new ideas. We figured out how to shape stones into tools so we could hunt better. We learned how to control fire, which gave us warmth, protection from predators, and a way to cook our food. And our throats changed, allowing us to make complex sounds. That was the beginning of language, which let us communicate, work together, and pass our knowledge down through generations.
Controlling fire and cooking our food, that was an absolute game changer, especially for our brains. See, cooking makes food way easier to chew and digest. That means our bodies didn't have to spend nearly as much energy breaking it down. And all that extra energy, it got rerouted to the most energy-hungry organ in our bodies, our brain. Our brains got bigger, more complex, and a whole lot smarter.
And that really brings us right up to today. That single cell, born in some ancient ocean, went on a 4 billion-year journey of survival and adaptation. And that journey led directly to us. We learned how to farm, we built massive civilizations, we invented thousands of incredible things, we've walked on the moon, and now we're planning to go to Mars. Our story is just incredible. It's a story of survival, of luck, of endless adaptation. But you know, none of it, not one bit, would have been possible without this planet. And that brings up the next big question. What made Earth the perfect place for life to even begin? Well, that's a story for another time.